Welcome to Alex Nanny, the Real Women of Vacation Rentals. I'm Alex,
And I'm Annie.
and we are joined today with two ladies. We have Margenett Moore Roberts, who is a host in Brooklyn, New York, and a member of RHOAR, and Gia Sharp, who is the co-founder of RHOAR. Ladies, it's so great to have you here today.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you. It's great to be here.
So we were talking off camera, and one of the things that I told you we wanted to do was we wanted to bring in more people in our podcast world that weren't coming from where we work in the larger management space. And I had the privilege of watching Margenett on stage at the Skiff conference in New York recently, and she gave a very impassioned speech and conversation and talk and answered great questions about what you guys both do as hosts in New York and some of the things that you've been facing. So I thought before we get started, each of you could introduce yourself and kind of talk about your experience leading up to RHOAR, and then we can get into what RHOAR is all about.
Gia, why don't you start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Gia. Thanks so much for having us, ladies. I'm really excited for this conversation. So I have been living in New York for 25 years, I think. And and we bought our house like 11 years ago on like FHA loan, just really scraped by to get it. And we have a two-family. I'd say a few years ago, we decided to do short-term rental because we had family staying in our second unit. And so we'd spend a lot of money redoing it and, looked into it. Oh, one and two family homeowners can do this, small homeowners can do this. And this new regulation does not include you. So we started and it was going great, and then found out, no, that was not true. So thankfully, another co-founder of RHOAR just posted on a message board saying, hey, let's fight this thing. And I was like, yes, let's do that. And that was over a year ago. And so we've been advocating ever since to get this right back. And, we've got hundreds of homeowners that are struggling, and we see in real time like what the effect of this legislation that was not nuanced has brought on just regular people trying to survive.
Yeah. And I'm Margenett Moore Roberts. I've been in New York over 20 years as well. I guess I'm formally a New Yorker now. We looked to buy a house here after we had our daughter. We looked to buy a house for a long time, 6 or 7 years. We just kept getting outbid, kept getting outbid, kept getting outbid. Every time I thought I'd had enough money saved to do it, the market would tick up another 10, 20%. And, when we finally found this house, it was definitely a stretch buy for us. We knew we could, meet the monthly payment, but, as everybody warns you, it's not just about the monthly payment. And so we always thought, okay, we have the second unit, we will use that to supplement the other costs of home ownership. So we spent a couple years just living here, getting it together. Like Gia said, we had to do some renovations to make it right for our family, and helping a couple friends out, who needed a place to stay for a while in the early days. And finally we got it to a point where we could do some rental or earn some income from the second unit. And we went into it very cautiously. We thought we'll do it a little bit at a time, and once we got into a rhythm, it was great for us. We knew we wouldn't always want someone in our second unit, just depending on what was going on in our lives, but when it was necessary and when we could, we were able to do it. So we started hosting in 2017, and for the most part have had a really positive experience up until we ran into these local laws being enforced in New York City. And for many of us one and two family homeowners, we were shocked to learn that we were included in those regulations, because up until the point of enforcement, we were told that it wasn't about one and two family private homeowners. So, I was trying to figure it out. I sat on day-long meetings, fighting, trying to make my voice heard. Did not come across RHOAR directly I have no idea why, but then I was eventually contacted by one of the other co-founders, and she asked me if I wanted to help. And absolutely, I'm here to help myself and my own family, but also for every other one and two family homeowner who's been impacted by this. It's a serious impact, so I'm here for the cause.
What a journey. Looking back on when the legislation went into place, I mean, just fill us in a little bit on the details of when that happened, what changed between when you initially thought that this was not going to impact you and then you found out that it was. Like, what happened during that time period?
Originally, there was just talk, through the media, that there was this huge legislation and these larger buildings in the city were complaining that had so much transients in and out, and it wasn't safe with all these people coming and going, and they were going to fix that. And for a very long time, even like officials were saying it's not 1 and 2 family homeowners, it's not private homeowners. We're talking about larger buildings. So that's what we all assumed was correct. And so early 2023, they said this law is about to come into effect, and it actually does include private homeowners. And so it's going into effect in September of 2023. So we had very little notice to understand, and it really wasn't notice. This is like just also the media reporting it. There was no official notice or education campaign by the city at all. So we had no idea that this was happening. And so just the drips and drabs you get from media, like we finally found out. And so they had a kind of a temporary period before they enforced, and that was starting in September. So, whatever, like I think people were still trying to like get as much business as they could to save up. And then on the platform side and on the host side, the tie was cut. And so because the enforcement is on both sides, they enforce against the platforms and against the host as well. So yeah, I mean, most people use platforms because it's a vetted and safe way to get guests, and it just makes it easier. And so it's just, yeah, it's really unfortunate because a lot of people, we have people that are just hurting so badly. I mean, we have one member that has moved out of his home in order to rent it long term so he doesn't lose it because he can't make enough money to pay his own mortgage. I mean, like things are just expensive here, and so people need that income. So, yeah.
When you determined that this was going to affect you, is that when RHOAR started, or was RHOAR something that came about through the process?
Yes. So like in that spring 2023, when it started becoming more in the media, that's when RHOAR started because Jean, one of our co-founders, she posted that message on the message board, and all of us were up in arms, and I raised my hand, said, yes, let's do this. And so several of us ladies came together and started RHOAR and started advocating, and also spoke out a lot on those message boards to, gain supporters and members. And, we've got lots of great members throughout the city in all 5 boroughs. And so, that we've been active since spring of 2023.
And I was just going to add, I think to Gia's point, the information was very uneven throughout this process. I forget, I got wind of it somehow. And I, in the early part of 2023, attended some all day, what they call listening sessions and, public comment sessions and periods. And we all were still in the mode of making sure that the city understood. The people on the calls that I was on, we were all in the mode of making sure the city understood. We are a unique constituency. We are not the bad actors. We're not hoarding inventory. These are private homes. And, at that time, we were still very much in the mode of believing that, we would not be included in the final wrap up. And so there was some early start stops. They were like, it's going into effect. No, it's not. We're going to delay it. We're going to take a new look at it. And a lot of different points of view were being considered. There was a suit involved. We thought we were going to win. It was just a lot of up and down, back and forth, trying to figure out, are you included? Are you not? Did we win the suit? Did we not? Like, it was just so many different points. And so by the time we got to September and enforcement was taking place for me, I think I was like already exhausted, like thinking, oh my goodness, so what are we going to do next? And then finding RHOAR, I was like, all right, let's get fired up. Let's go. There were so many ways in which this was confusing and not fully considered, including the fact that most of the current city council wasn't a part of the decision when it was made in 2018. That's a really weird thing about this law. It was actually passed in 2018, and then enforcement didn't happen until 2023. And so in that gap of time, I think people just 1 and 2 family homeowners, we really were operating under the belief that we would not be included. So it was just took a long time to get organized and get ourselves together just in order to start to fight it and advocate for ourselves.
Gosh. And what is the main mission of RHOAR, and what is the mission at this point? I mean, what options do you have, and what does life look like for you if you're able to get some sort of a success in the future?
Well, the hope is that, I mean, we're advocating, to our elected officials to create amendments to that law because the law is too broad and too sweeping and swept us up and was not supposed to. So hopefully we can get unrestricted access or right to short-term rentals because there's a lot of regulation around it. You cannot have any locks on doors. You cannot have more than 2 people. You must be present in the same unit. And they don't count me owning my house and living my house as the same unit when I have a second unit. And they don't count it if you're in a single family and you will need to go, you're going away for vacation and want to rent your space while you're away. They don't count that as being present. So It's really odd because, hotels, there are locks on the doors. No one's expected to share your hotel room with you. It's
Yeah,
really weird.
exactly.
It's really weird. So those just don't make sense. And so we're trying to fight for our right to have unrestricted access to the short-term rentals.
Do you feel like you have anybody on the legislative side within the government that's listening or is helping you kind of navigate through this? Because I think that's always the biggest challenge is trying to figure out like who to go to, like who are the right people and the right players to have a seat at the table with.
Right. I mean, we're all constituents. We are all taxpayers, so we're advocating to our elected leaders, and we're hearing a lot of sympathetic ears, and we're hoping that there's going to be someone's really listening to make some progress on this. So that's what we have to do. It's a constant battle. We're not moneyed interest, we're not the hotel lobby that spent $2 million to get this passed, we're just regular people.
I just wanted to interject to Gia's point to say we're not anti-legislation or regulations. We do not support, the people who are exploiting the market. And there was some exploitation. We all have to be honest about that. What we are saying is that for, 1 and 2 family private homeowners, most of us are lower to middle income homeowners. There is such a thing. We're just trying to hold on to our homes and make ends meet. And so there is, I think, to the point you made earlier, Annie, all short-term rentals are not the same. Different people are in it for different reasons. And, what we are trying to represent are the constituents like ourselves who are private homeowners, 1 and 2 families. We've all tried to do the right things here and really create an opportunity for ourselves to stay self-sufficient, take care of our families, housing security, financial stability, and just really stay in the city we love. Gia and I are both transplants. We love New York. I want to be here. But in order to stay here and maintain a life for my family, this is one of the ways that I need to make income.
Yeah, and I think it really doesn't matter where you are. When legislation comes down, the people that are doing right by this type of business model, everybody's in agreement that regulations are a good thing. I mean, they're there if done correctly to keep people safe and to better the community. But I mean, in this case, we just had Marcus Radar, who's the CEO of Hostaway, on our show just recently, and he was in New York City when we recorded that episode. He had just gotten done with Skift that you guys were at. And he said he had booked originally on Airbnb, and then the legislation came down and he couldn't book it on Airbnb. So the host reached out to him and he booked it on Craigslist, I think. And it's like, now we're going back to a different era of time where things were not as safe. I mean, Airbnb has created at least some ways that you can make sure that you do have good renters and that the property is what it says it is. And now we're going, in a much darker direction.
100%.
I think that's right. I heard that podcast. I heard Marcus. He was funny. But one of the points he made, I think it's super important. Like, there's no accountability in a system, that cannot be regulated or monitored. And when people get desperate, unfortunately, some people have turned to Craigslist or, ways that, other ways of getting guests and creating income using their property. Like, one of the big messages at the Skip conference was these are assets that we've all earned and that we're trying to leverage in order to take care of ourselves. We shouldn't be made to feel bad about leveraging the assets that we've acquired over time. And when you give people the option of losing your home or, doing something that's a little bit less safe, some people are going to choose to use a Craigslist or to use an unregulated platform in order to maintain, take care of their families and maintain the lives that they built. So he made a really great point there, and I'm really grateful that he made it. But I don't think it can be overstated. Like, we're introducing a level of danger in terms of having inviting strangers in your home. How do you get paid? How do you transfer the money? How do you make sure the person is a person? When they're contacting you, there's just so many reasons why, enabling it above board is the right thing to do.
Yeah. So you guys have a little over I think you said around 550 members, and you represent all the boroughs in New York. And so obviously that's a pretty good cross section of the community and all different socioeconomic types, I would imagine. How do you get that voice collectively together? Because the people in the different boroughs are all different. I mean, it's like they love different baseball teams, they love different football teams. So how do you get everybody together together and like what is that collective message and like what are you doing to get it out there and advocate for yourselves? Because again, New York is a big city. It's very easy to feel lost just walking down the street. I can only imagine stuck in bureaucracy what that feels like.
100%. So our members are in at least 3/4 of the city council districts. So we are, it's basically foot soldiers out and going advocating to their own as constituents to their own council members. And also we've got lots of tools on our website, RHOAR.org, that can send letters directly to the council, to the mayor, and actually soon from different constituencies, from the tourist point of view, the visitor, the supporter. Like there's plenty of people in New York where the apartments are like a postage stamp that can't host their own family in their home when their mother comes to visit to help a new grandchild. And so those types of people can, sign on to our website and send a letter very soon within a week of support. I mean, honestly, everybody should be calling their council members and the city officials because we all use this, especially in New York, at one point or another, whether we're hosts or guests, because we all need it. I have neighbors who, and this is also Brooklyn, is a land of brooks because there's water running under us. And so every time it rains really hard, there's a flood in someone's basement. And I can't tell you how many times on a message board, somebody's like, I've got to leave my house for a few days. I need a place to stay. So we host our neighbors. And so, there's so many different types of people that need it. And so we're advocating for all, we're trying to get all of them and kind of shouting it from the rooftops to speak up to their elected officials about how important this is to have it in the local communities. And no, we're not going to be able to stay in a hotel in Times Square when our basement gets flooded. I live in Brooklyn, so.
Right. And I would say, like, overall, you asked about the diversity of our constituencies, and it is varied, right? It's people who are raising kids now, people who are empty nesters.
We just have a wide variety of age groups, especially we've got people that are retired, people that are disabled, people that are self-employed, unemployed. There's just such a plethora, and there's such an idea that people, just because you own something in New York, you must be wealthy. And that's so insane because the majority of the houses are in the far-flung neighborhoods where it's not these multi-million dollar houses. I mean, we're people that have had these houses for many years or many generations and are just trying to hold on to this family home for, multiple generations of our family. So it's just, we're very diverse.
I was also getting at that is one of the parts of the point, but it's really bigger than, any single organization. It's bigger than ROAR. It's bigger than the platforms, right? This is not an issue for the OTAs, for, Airbnb or Vrbo or even Furnish Finder, et cetera. It really, for us in New York, it's about individual homeowners being able to hold on to their homes. The reality is, if we are forced to leave our homes because we can't afford it, the inventory here is so tight. There's nowhere for us to go. Most people will be forced to leave New York. And so we're trying to create, the narrative. Like there's a lot about housing affordability. There's a lot about the housing crisis in general in New York. What we're asking is that existing homeowners also be included in that conversation. Most of the conversation now really focuses on enabling new homeowners or taking care of renters. Obviously, these are important constituents. We don't want anyone to not have anywhere to live, but once you're in your home, the stakes are super duper high in terms of, holding on to it. And so we're trying to create a narrative for our elected officials and individuals that says, keep New York, New York, keep people in their homes is very much a part of the housing crisis and the housing affordability conversation. But also, if you want New York to not be a place for only a very small, set of very wealthy people, then you have to enable that for people who need alternative means of affording their homes, and that includes short-term rental.
One of the sad things about this is that it was done behind the scenes, it sounds like, and that there was a lot that was done that just you didn't know what was going on, and then all of a sudden, there's nothing that you could do, and I've seen that happen in many other different instances, and not just short-term rentals, but just in different places that I've lived. And one of the things that I've also seen is that if a big initiative comes out and then there's a lot of pushback on all of it or part of it. The other side typically says, well, we can't go back to the table to fix one part of it because then it could blow up the entire thing altogether. Is that kind of what they're saying up there? What's the conversation, do you think, within the political side?
I think early on, yeah, it's like they don't want to give an inch. And so
Yeah.
I think that's a political maneuvering. I mean, that I'm learning. They want to hold fast so they get what they want. But even if they know that it's not the right thing, just because they get most of what they want. So we're hopeful that they are seeing, the proof is in the pudding. Has the housing crisis abated? No, it has not.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
hotels are making an additional $380 million
Yeah.
this year. So there's
Yeah. It's
that,
very clear who's winning here. Very
Exactly.
clear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We'll be back in just a minute after a word from our premier brand sponsor, Hostaway. Buying a new property management system can be a daunting task. We get it. Researching, implementing, and onboarding new software can be time intensive and costly. And there's always that lingering fear that the product might not deliver on its promises. But for short term property managers, there's a game changer in the industry.
That's right. Hostaway is the fastest growing and top rated property management system for short term rental property managers. And for good reason.
Hostaway doesn't just streamline your operations, it makes you more money. Thousands of Hostaway users have quickly realized their return on investment with profitability boosting features like
Increase bookings through multi channel distribution, cutting out commission by driving guests to your own direct booking website, and increase revenue per reservation through offering tasteful upsells.
Plus, with Hostaway's new dynamic pricing feature, you can increase revenue per listing by 20% without worrying that you're leaving money on the table or pricing yourself out of the market.
Listeners of Alex and Annie podcast can onboard Hostaway for only $100. That's $400 off the regular onboarding fee. Visit get.hostaway.com/Alex and Annie for a demo and to learn more.
Ready to go pro? Learn why thousands of property managers are using Hostaway to take their vacational business to the next level.
Visit get.hostaway.com/Alex and Annie and get started today.
We're saying there's room for nuance in the law. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And I think, again, the reason why we didn't organize, RHOAR probably wasn't organized until, after the beginning of the year, was because we really thought that the law, and there's documentation that there was talk of exempting 1 and 2 family homeowners when this law was originally being considered back in 2018. And so we really thought that was the way forward. But, what we would say, our appeal is there's still room for nuance. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater either way. We believe in common sense regulation, and we believe that 1 and 2 family private homeowners should be exempt. And there's a way for the city to endorse that, and there's a way for the platforms to endorse it as well. So that's a very narrow carve out, and it's a very reasonable solution.
I wanted to touch on something. Gia, you had commented that the money that the hotel lobby had spent, and that's come up in many other destinations. And from experience for myself, when COVID happened and there was the lockdown here in Florida, when they reopened, our governor said, well, hotels they're necessities. We have to have hotels open. And it flew completely in the face of what all this COVID protocol was about, having your own space and having your own facilities to be able, again, bathrooms and all these type of things. And so we were all sort of baffled at it. And then there was a lot of, I'm not going to say I ever saw the proof of it, but there was definitely an underlying tone that the hotels were involved and making sure that narrative was pushed along. But I'm curious, for a city like New York, that does have so many hotels and the hotel lobby is very, very powerful. How do you look at that and think okay, we can fight this, or we can get them to understand our side to help, to your point, Margenett, nuance this law? I mean, that's a very big beast to fight. And I applaud anybody that wants to go up against it. But 500 people up against something that has seemingly endless coffers to dip into. What is your approach there?
I mean, the reality is we're people, and it's like, are you against the people? Is that what you're asking? You know what I mean? And so it's like we hold a mirror up to kind of the conduct and what's happening and what the reality is, and that we are actually we're New Yorkers. We are the real New York, We're not some foreign owned, hotel chain or whatever, we're not this multi-billionaire that probably has his own private jet. We're not any of those people. We're actually New Yorkers. So I think for us, that is our strength, because sometimes you have to live in what's right, and hold it up and make people account for it. So it's hard. It's hard because there's also political realities, and we get it, but I don't know. I don't know, Margenett, what do you do you have a better answer than me? 'Cause
I think that's right. What I would say is, we're not the enemy. We hotel lobby, fear not. My little house in Brooklyn, and even the collection of homes by, owned by RHOAR members and other people who may not even be RHOAR members, we pose no threat. Instead, we are maintaining the communities. You think about right now, I think the average price for a hotel in New York City is $300 a night. 300, and that's for a low end hotel. During the holidays, we saw some data, I think around Memorial Day weekend, where it was started at $600 a night, going up to $1,200 a night. This very quickly becomes an equity issue, an economic equity issue. Who can afford to visit New York? So if you have a family that you don't want to push into a tiny, hotel room when you have more than two people, then your best option is to stay in a home with a host family where you can spread out and you can afford to buy a loaf of bread and a dozen of eggs and eat, within your room. So this very quickly for the hotel lobby, we would just say, we know that business is important, but take a look at really who you're fighting. You're punching down. You're punching down. We are not your competition by any means. Now, if you want to look at people who hoarded rooms, the quote unquote bad actors, I think that the law was designed to address that. And it's done that by and large. We saw that from the Real Estate Board of New York, who said by and large, a lot of the regulation has been successful in normalizing things in big apartment buildings. What we would say is the law has gone too far. And the hotel lobby, you probably have members in that union who own homes. And even if they're not hosts today, they may need to host in the future. So it's very much, we're not fighting them because we're not equipped to. That is not our objective. We know that's a fool's errand. But we will just emphasize that our goal is not to upturn any industry. Our goal is to hold on to our homes. And as representatives of people who are New Yorkers who likely own homes, who likely need to hold on to those homes to have housing security for their families, you ought to be supportive. You ought to be supportive of the advocacy work that we're doing. And I think there's a real opportunity to sort of fill that gap.
I agree. I'll also add to that is that many of the private homes are actually in the low-lying districts, which are outside of the city center and are nowhere near any hotels. Like there really are no, hotels in those areas, which is part of why this is such kind of a community benefit that, people would be able to do, host people because where else are their family going to stay?
Gia, you just reminded me of that. We've really been thinking about the effect it has on us as homeowners, but what is also true is short-term rental opens up microeconomies in our communities. So you're talking about people who clean, those people have been really impacted. People who are using the short-term rental industry in their neighborhoods to earn extra money to take care of their families. The cleaners, the people who manage the properties, the small businesses, the bodegas and restaurants in these neighborhoods, they've also taken a hit, right? Because they haven't been able to get that constant influx of new customers, the constant influx of new incremental revenue. So it goes beyond the individual homeowner. You're talking about neighborhoods and creating economic opportunity where people live. So that has to be considered in this conversation as well.
Have you communicated with Airbnb at all on this? I mean, I feel like if anybody can fight this or has the budget to fight it, it's going to be Airbnb.
Yeah, we want to talk to all. Like the Skiff conference was great in that regard because we were able to not only connect with the folks from Airbnb, but we are also able to connect with Furnish Finder, Future Stay with Philip. I got a connection to B&B Finder to Verbo. So we really believe that this issue will affect any business that relies on small homeowners in order to make money. And so, we're open to doing as much coalition building as makes sense, as long as it aligns to our original mission. Our mission remains to, get an amendment for these regulations for 1 and 2 family homeowners. And if there's an organization out there, obviously, within reason, we don't want to make deals with the devil, so to speak, but we really believe it's beyond any single platform. This is not an issue for, about Verbo. It's not an issue about the single platforms. It's larger than that. So to the degree that organizations that are, travel related, but also the banks, The banks have been out here saying that they want to help people own homes for the first time. Our appeal is help people keep the homes that they're already in, help people that mortgage payment. So we think we've done as much as we could do as a grassroots organization on an individual basis. We've gotten the story out, but now we need the coalition build. So that's why we're super appreciative of the opportunity to share your platform here. But we want as many people with big megaphones as we can to tell these stories of individual homeowners who are in danger of losing their homes and how vital this income is, for people who are trying to make ends meet. Financial lives change. The bottom line is you have a couple of good years, then you might have a couple of down years, then you might rebound. People need a way to weather the financial storms of life, especially the financial storms that New York City can bring on.
I find it interesting that this was all in play before COVID because it seems like so much has happened since COVID. And so New York was obviously thinking about this and had some problems that they were trying to, I guess, probably play whack-a-mole with would be my guess. There's things popping up everywhere. And I'm sure COVID just exacerbated what the thought process is. And you mentioned that the people that kind of put the regulatory framework together weren't actually the ones that were there when it was implemented. So have you gone back to any of those people and been able to talk to them to maybe get their insight on, like, again, totally different world that post-COVID, that they would have done it differently? Like, have you been able to talk to any of those people?
Not really, no. A lot of them kind of left public service, so um, it's like, see you later. Here's a gift for you. No, not really. I mean, it would be interesting to hear. I mean, like just in our own research, we could see that there was influence on codes and regulations going back, at least 10 to 12 years, that people have been lobbying for changes quietly in the codes over years to kind of culminate in this legislation, which is disturbing because that means that really our rights were changing all along. We just didn't know about it and they weren't enforcing it yet. And they needed this legislation to start enforcing it. So, but none of us knew it. So we didn't know to fight it. We didn't know, any of it, which is that shouldn't be the way the government is run. But
Yeah, that I feel like I found out there's no Santa Claus. I mean, color me naive. I mean, I think what Gia's point is so important because, what I've learned is we have to keep our eye on the ball locally, obviously, and nationally, because a lot of the enforcement of the current regulations would not have been possible without the changes that they started making back in 2018 and before, because they were little teeny changes to the housing code. At one point, it specifically said 1 and 2 family, homeowner. The definition of an illegal hotel started at 3+ families. Then they changed it to include 1 and 2 family homes as well. So all of those little adjustments along the way, those things made a big difference in making sure that the current state could be endorsed. And I think that's super important. And the other point, I made this at Skiff, but I just think we have to keep saying this. Like, regulations that are put in place today have long, far reaching implications. If you look at the fact that there's a lot of other stuff going on, it's not just regulations around short term rental. This is one thing, but also look at the forever renter movement. People are being discouraged from buying homes now. And if you go forward for a generation of people who decide, I don't need to own a home, that's the major vehicle for creating wealth, for creating financial stability for families. So a lot of these regulations are going to impact that as well. You're going to send the whole process backward. You're fighting to close the racial wealth gap. And in this case in New York, a lot of people who are being affected by this law, families of color, people are deciding to leave, right? Because they can't afford to stay. But the long-term impact of that is you literally have 200,000 fewer Black families in the city as you've had over 20 years ago. So these are not free of impact. We're fighting for this one law, but really, if you put all of these pieces together, a more dire picture will emerge as well.
Yeah, and it erodes the tax base, which ultimately takes care of the community, the schools, the fire department, the police department. I know my father was a policeman growing up. I mean, I know how important those things are. And if you don't have the tax base to support it, then that's where the cuts start to happen. And, God knows what happens if your fire department doesn't have a truck to get to a house when it's on fire. But you're absolutely right. And I think people get lost in the sauce, so to speak, and forget that sometimes these policies are a long game for some political view or party or however you want to, so like this was something that, again, they were putting into place well before COVID, and so much regulation has come in after COVID because so many people entered the space. But you guys were doing the right thing and being good citizens and being good for your community and trying to, to the point of like trying to help build up your community and make it a better, more viable, vibrant place to live. And they just completely cut that, or I guess took that stool right out from under you without even talking about it.
It'll be interesting too to see, I mean, what the data shows after a year in of having these regulations. I mean, it's one thing for the hotels to report that, yep, they're full and their ADR is, just absolutely outrageous. Looking at the impact that that has on New York City and the suburbs and the destination as a whole, I mean, there's a lot of people that are going to be impacted by this. So I know everybody wants hotels to do well, but at some point it's like, the city leadership has to stand up to it because the impacts are just going to continue to ripple.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And if you look at, from 2022 to 2023, Property Shark reported that the foreclosure rates in New York City were up over 87%. And if you look at Brooklyn alone, it was something like 180%. If you go up to the Bronx, pre-foreclosure filings were up over 1900%. So you're absolutely right. The impact is not just on, on us as individuals. It's not on the tourists, but it changes the whole fabric of the city. And we have clear evidence. There's documented data that tells us that people who are buying these homes, once people are forced out, are, people from overseas. And most of the time, investors or developers. It's changing the fabric of the city. So, that's what's at stake here. We're obviously we're fighting for a small constituency, but this is about the fabric of New York City. And to your point about your dad, Annie, like middle income people who work very, very hard. These are not people who are not wealthy, who have to still work for a living. How do you hold on to homes that, we have data that shows our insurance rates have gone up between 10 and 25%. Property taxes, because of, how many $1 million+ homes, they've gone up 15 to 20%. So even if you got your mortgage, even if you can make your monthly mortgage, what you need help with is all the other stuff, the new windows, the new roof. And people like your dad or anybody who has a job, where they have to work hard, who generally that income bracket are the folks who really need to rely on supplemental income. Your people work 2 jobs already, come on, like, what are we people? So I think there's a lot more at stake than what meets the eye right now.
I think there's a lot to be done. And there's a lot to keep focused on. And for you ladies, anything that we can do to obviously help you get your word out, we want to, because this impacts not just the short-term rentals in New York. It impacts, it's impacting New Jersey in a great way, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't turn around and impact them the same way. So,
And it's coming for other cities, I'm sure
Yep.
too. So, I mean, this is just the first one for it to get this bad. But I mean, if this starts becoming a thing in all the major cities, I mean, now you've got a nationwide crisis.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the focus, is to get a one major, because it's like the biggest market, right? And once they have that, like now Barcelona saying that they're going to do away with it in 2 years, completely, which is, I mean, we'll see what happens between now and then, but like it's just kind of insane. I mean, we definitely want livable cities. I mean, they're already so expensive, but we need to make sure that the people who live in them, it's livable for them too, and actually affordable. And that's what this does. We're responsible neighbors. Obviously, if someone's living in my space, with me, I'm definitely not going to be allowing like ragers and like all kinds of,
Right.
Yeah.
tomfoolery, So,
Yeah.
and I think that's kind of the nuance that we're advocating for. But thank you so much again. I mean, like for sure, we would love for your entire listening audience check out RHOAR.org, RHOAR.org, and see how they can support, because I'm sure plenty of people want to come to New York and we'd love to host you. We just need to get some help on that advocacy.
That's right. Thank you, Gia, for getting that in there. The real opportunity here is to let our elected officials know that there's support broader than, even if you're not a host, it makes common sense to help small homeowners, particularly middle and lower income homeowners, to hold on to their homes, and using short-term rental as a way to do that. So we are, if David and Goliath were a thing, we're not trying to fight the hotel lobby. That's not our fight to have. We're just trying to go into our homes, and anyone who believes in that, who is a homeowner and believes that we should have help, and the right to use the assets that we've earned to do that, they can help by making their voice heard as well. So thank you so much for giving us the platform, and to share your platform and your membership with us, and give us a chance to have this conversation.
Yeah, I'm so glad that Annie and Margenett, that you met at Skift, because what a different topic for us today. I mean, we talk about legislation and advocacy fairly often on the show, but this is a very different perspective on it, and affecting people in a different way than a traditional vacation destination. So I'm sure our audience is going to be interested to listen, and certainly will reach out, and hopefully they'll support RHOAR. If they want to reach out to you individually outside of RHOAR, can they do that on the site, or is LinkedIn good, or email?
I think, yeah, they could do that on the site. If there's definitely, I believe, a contact us on the site, and they can definitely, if they've got ideas, want to support. I mean, like I said, we'll have links to send letters. But we'd love to hear from people.
Organize at roar.org. Yeah, organize at roar.org. If you're writing to support us, we want to hear it now. If you're not, well, not so much, but
Yeah.
Fair point.
but organize at roar is a good way to get directly to Gia and the other founders, and they normally loop me in, and then we'll take it from there. Advocacy, we have to be advocates for this work, because it gets away from you quickly. And this is probably linked to something else in the future. We'd love to be a part of heading that off too.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, and for allowing me to kind of attack you after skipped to ask you again. This is a completely different thing, but I think it just proves that the industry that Alex and I love, and obviously you guys love it for the perspective you're coming from, it's being attacked from all sides. And it's really important that we can get everybody collectively together to understand how to support one another, or we're all going to be out of business.
That's right. It depends on each other. Yeah, we have to figure out what this joint sort of alliance looks like, because I think one without the other, like they can't exist on their own. So yeah, hopefully we continue that conversation too. That's a little bit of a different conversation, but it's an important one, because even if we get the regulations and we're not able to support each other on the other side of that, we still have a problem. So we might as well start working on that one now too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, ladies. If anyone wants to contact Annie and I, you can go to alexandanniepodcast.com. And until next time, thanks for tuning in, everybody.